Hello, everybody. This is Brad Swift of Gaya's Call, and this is Gaya's Call 2.0 with my co-host, Marla of the Eco Chapter. Hey, Marla.
Hi.
Good to talk to you again. One of the reasons we do this is so we get to talk from two different corners of the world.
Yeah, today I'm in Bali in Indonesia, so not in Singapore at the moment. Hi.
Yeah. And at the
It's
moment, I'm
still
still in
it's
the
still like 11 p.m. though.
11 p.m. there. It's 10 a.m. here
Yeah.
in North Carolina, and we're here to talk about the human response to what we talked about in our last episode, which is the whole polycrisis, metacrisis itself.
Mhm.
So, what we'll be exploring today is about eco anxiety, uh, and apathy, and hopefully also awakening,
Yeah.
which is where we want to, head towards is that awakening to what's what we're in the midst of, but also what's possible as well. So, I think kind of to lay the foundation. Let's start this. If you could briefly kind of define or describe, kind of get us back up to speed in case somebody did not see the first episode on the polycrisis. What are we talking about when we're talking about the polycrisis and metacrisis?
Yeah, so in the last episode, which you should watch, but if you haven't, the polycrisis is literally many crises happening all at the same time and the effects of all of those things happening all at once. So we brought up the idea that there was the climate crisis, there's the plastic crisis, the ecological crisis, biodiversity loss crisis, there's wars, there's in Asia at the moment, this is December 2025. There's lots of unnatural weather, extreme weather happening at the moment, and all of these is are crises. And so the idea of a polycrisis is really all these things happening all at once and how we are dealing with them as people and people who are part of nature. And so today we're talking about the human way of dealing with all these things.
Yeah, because it's really is once you begin to see and realize that we're not talking about something maybe happening. We're in the midst of it, and we may be in the early midst of it, but it's already happening. It's not something that we're saying may happen in the future. But when you do see the poly crisis clearly, it's really hard not to feel something, fear, sadness, even paralysis. You could even say that's kind of a sane response to this kind of insane situation that we're in the midst of itself.
Yeah.
So that's what we want to look at today is the emotional aspects of being in the poly crisis and how can we navigate through that emotional turmoil so that we can continue to be effective to do our part to navigate through this not only for ourselves but for our children and their children.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the news at the moment, it's quite terrifying. So just a couple of months ago, we used to call it climate change, and now it's the climate crisis. And everything on the news is, floods and typhoons and fires, forest fires. It's just lots and lots of doom and gloom and horrible things happening everywhere. So then how do you not feel paralyzed, like you said, that this is too big for us to deal with, and therefore we become apathetic or we deny that this is even happening. We just shut ourselves off, which then of course makes the problem bigger.
Yeah, ignoring the problem doesn't have it go away.
Oh,
It has us be not participating in moving through this in a way that will, if nothing else, hopefully minimize the degree of disruption, and to not uh, be frozen by it. Uh, the quote that I wanted to kind of work off of that really struck me very hard in the uh, Jeremy Lentz, the web of meaning. He talks about as you weigh these issues, there is no need to decide whether to be optimistic or pessimistic. Ultimately, it's a moot point. As author Rebecca Slonick, and I'm probably butchering her name, I apologize for that, but as she observed, both positions merely become excuses for inaction. Optimists believe things will work out fine without them, and pessimists believe nothing they do can make things better. So where do you go if you want to be not an optimist or a pessimist? What's that kind of central area, that midpoint where we can move forward? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, just before we talk about that, I also wanted to bring up another definition called hypernormalism. And this is
Hmm.
almost like a complete acceptance that this is normal and there's nothing wrong with what's happening. So this definition of hypernormalism was coined by a Russian historian in the 80s, and it was from the Soviet society. Like everyone there knew that the society wasn't working and that it was corrupt and that the bosses were looting the system. But they also knew that the bosses knew that, and everybody knew that everything was fake, and nobody had a different vision for a different kind of society. So that fakeness became completely normal, and they just lived with it. And that's kind of what we're doing now. We're all just kind of accepting that this is life and this is normal, but it's very clear, and the science has proven without a doubt that this is definitely not normal. The weather patterns are not normal. And they're all 99.9% of climate scientists have said that this is because of human actions, and that's why we're in this mess at the moment. So yeah, so moving back to this middle ground where we are not just saying that this is normal life, and yet we're not just being overly um, optimistic about everything or extremely pessimistic about it. So I think how do we move through this, accepting that this is not normal and but yet that we can do something about it. It doesn't have to be the be all and end all until we we blow ourselves up.
Yeah, yeah. So for me, one of the places that we can kind of center ourselves into that middle point is hope. Not hope like, oh, it'll all work out. Not that kind of non-grounded hope, but hope like that we can move forward to do our part to move through this as well. Um, there's another quote here I want to use. Um, Hope is a state of mind, not a state of the world.
Yeah.
It is a deep orientation of the human soul that can be held at the darkest times, an ability to work for something because it is good, not because it stands a chance to succeed.
And if you need another quote about hope, it's from Shawshank Redemption. If you haven't watched that movie, so this is from he says, "Remember that hope is a good thing, Red, maybe the best of things, and no good thing ever dies." So, and then he escaped, right, from the prison. So, yeah, it's really a state of mind. It's not like even if they were in prison and there for life, it was this idea of a state of mind where he managed to dig a hole through walls and tunnels with a spoon. So there's hope.
Right? Yeah. And taking the actions when you don't know. There's no, we're not in a movie. We're living this,
Yes.
There's no guarantee that our actions, I know for myself, this whole idea of having a podcast with Marla, there's a little part of me that says, oh, this is, nobody's going to listen to you and Marla. But if I indulge that mental, that kind of natural part of human being, that resistance, then nothing happens. But
Yeah.
if I kind of ground myself in, there might just be one person or two people who listen to this and say, wow, I didn't even know we were in the midst of a polycrisis. Let me look into that. Then that makes a difference. And there's a book I read recently called Fluke. and I apologize, I don't remember the author off the top of my head, but he talks about that is, we control nothing, but we influence everything.
Yeah.
So our actions have an influence. And so for me, it's looking at how can I have my actions and the conversations I generate, whether it's be out here in the world, globally with, online or with my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old grandkids, how can those words and those actions influence them in a positive way? Again, to not bury our heads in the sand and ignore what we're in the midst of, but to be able to keep that hopefulness so that we can take the appropriate actions itself.
Yeah, I think the sad thing that's happening in the younger generations as well is that lots of now adults don't want to have children because they say, why would I bring children into this very hopeless world? Which is sad, right? Because the more people that lose hope, the less hope, the more hopeless we're going to be. And then we're kind of just digging a grave and burying ourselves already without even trying to move away from that hopelessness and move into something more beautiful. I also have this experiment that I read up. It was done in the 1950s on rats. So, of course, this is animal welfare issues. But this guy, Kurt Richter, he found that rats that were drowned or drowning uh, gave up almost immediately when they thought they had no hope. But the minute they learned that there was hope, they could live and keep swimming for 60 hours. So from like 2 seconds to 60 hours, just because they realized that there was some possibility that someone might save them. There wasn't any definite safety, but there was a idea that maybe they would get saved, and that changed the whole thing. And even, we can see that rats can do this in drowning when they're drowning in buckets. Like, why can't we do the same?
Right. Yeah, very good. I'm familiar with that experiment too, and like you, it's like that seemed an awfully cruel thing to do to the rats. But the point being, um, when they were actually rescued, that experience of being saved
Yeah,
strengthened their resolve and their hopefulness, so
yeah,
that they could, persist much longer. And this is one of those things we need that level of hope for the persistence because the issues that we're talking about, this polycrisis, all the different aspects of it, it didn't happen overnight. It's happened literally, decades,
yeah,
decades of unawareness, in many cases, just not being aware that what we were doing. And now that we're aware, it's going to take decades to, work through this and to create a new future that will allow us to thrive, probably not in the same kind of society that we have now, the same culture. We don't know what that will be. My sense of it is it's going to include or entail re-embracing our relationship to nature.
yeah. I
Can
mean,
you speak about that?
there's a workshop that I do called the Deep Time Walk. And it's literally 4.6 billion years in 4.6 kilometers. So going back all the way from the dawn of time and how we came to be here.
Hmm.
And all of the things that we've done. So if you imagine 4.6 kilometers, everything that we've done is literally in like the tip of your fingernail. 4.6 billion years, and our Anthropocene, our mess is like this much time. If you think of 4.6 kilometers in 4.6 billion years. And so as in the deep time walk at the end of the session of the workshop, there are three options that we have. It's really like, do we stay as we are now in terms of business as usual, in terms of carbon emissions going through the roof? We have 7 planetary boundaries breached. We've just almost lost the coral reefs because of the tipping points. Or do we kind of move away from that and we could move into the great turning or the great unraveling? And I know this is part of your one cause, Brad, as well. So maybe you want to You want to talk about those?
Yeah, uh, those are distinctions, I guess you could say, from Joanna Macy's work,
Yeah.
extraordinary woman who is no longer with us, but her mission and her power continues. Her work continues. Um, that the great turning, the great collapse, I would say we're probably in the midst of both of them. It's not like one or the other. Both are happening, but also looking at how can we not get disempowered and frozen or, into inaction by the possibility of a great collapse, but how can we continue to be looking at the great turning, which like turning to a whole new possibility for humanity. That's I think you mentioned earlier, I believe, in this podcast about a vision for the future. And I don't think we can count on our political leaders to create that future. It's going to take, as often, almost invariably happens, these types of cultural transformations start from the ground up. And it's through these types of conversations that we can begin to get a clearer picture of what would the great turning future look like. I call it the pariah culture, in the work that I'm doing in One Cause, is really reimagining us in a intimate and close relationship to nature and embracing the great truths of both the interconnectedness of all of us and of all nature, of all of the entire world, which helps to kind of heal that sense of isolation that we might be feeling. The whole notion of sufficiency, which can, soften the fear of scarcity and that there's not enough. There really is enough.
Yeah.
We've just forgotten how to share what is available to us.
Yeah. Yeah, and for me as well, like we've just published a book called Dreams of Unwritten Futures, and it's really about the same thing. Like it's really about how do we show people that there are better future narratives that we can write. So every single story and short story and poem in that book kind of talks about the fact that we learned from our mistakes and we turned. Like we didn't go into the great unraveling where things got even more messy than it already is now. We moved away from business as usual and we moved into the great turning where people found their spaces in nature, they found their places in community and reciprocity, kinship with the land and our non-human and more than human brethren as well. And the whole book kind of just puts imaginations, I hope, into people's head that this could happen. I think a lot of what we see on the news is that this is not happening. But there are so many of us around the world that are writing stories, doing permaculture, building communities, um, that we really want to put hope back into the world and say, like, hey, we can do this. We got ourselves into this mess. We can get out of it. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, very good. Yeah, and a lot of my focus these days is for the young people,
Yeah.
the generations that are coming up behind us. And for young people, this whole eco anxiety is often a mirror of adults' lack of action.
Yeah.
So when they can see us as adults who caring deeply and acting in the face of all of this, it restores their hope and it starts to build that type of energy. So
Yeah.
Marla and I didn't discuss this, but I'm going to offer something else, since she brought up her great book. It's available. I believe it's available, the conventional places in Amazon and the like. It's also available.
Mhm.
I'm saying it softly because I don't want everybody to hear this. It's also available in the Eco Guardian Secret Society Library. And we will post attached to this. Only a very few people will even know about it, but there in the Secret Society Library, it's there with a number of other books
Yeah.
like Eco Adventure Series, Zach Bates' Eco Adventure series, other books, and we're continuing adding to these ecological, eco fiction, and nonfiction in the library because we want people to have access to these narratives, these
Yeah.
possibility narratives, and they're available on a pay what you will because we don't want the economic situation to be a deterrent to being able to download that. So you can download these books. If you're really tight, it can be for free. If you've got some extra, a little extra money, put a few dollars towards that. If you happen to be very affluent right now and you want to put a couple $100 towards it, that's perfectly fine as well. All the money that's collected will go towards expanding this conversation that this podcast is about as well. So I hope I didn't spill the beans too much on that.
Yeah. Now that we've completely diverged from what we're talking about, I wanted to bring up this because so Brad works a lot with children and he does like eco camps and this secret library. Whereas like in Singapore and globally, because I also work a lot online, I'm working with adults. So I've just done webinars with small, micro to small companies and also with parents of these children. Because it's not so easy as an adult, I feel, when you're supposed to be the one with all the answers, yet you might not know how to handle these kinds of questions or this kind of explanation. And so with the eco chapter as well, like I'm also providing education services like workshops and talks and panels, and I also write articles. And a lot of the articles are on Substack for free, and that's actually how me and Brett met through the articles that I was writing on Substack. So yeah, I think for the adults as well, it must be scary. I don't have kids, but it must be scary for you guys to see that your kids or grandkids, like Brad's grandkids, are growing up in this quite volatile world. And the best thing for you to do is to really get educated to be able to teach them the right ways, and for you to have hope you're on your own. And for that to happen, it's really about empowerment. Empowerment is really about understanding all the science that's going into these things, not just, swimming in this alphabet soup of acronyms and jargon and technicalities, because they're actually real things and they're really happening at the moment. So I think it's really important as well, even for companies, because it's really for you guys to make those decisions to be trailblazers to change the system, or at least open up new pathways for new systems to be. Otherwise, we're all just going to be, oh, I don't want to lose out and I don't want to be the first one to make a change, and so I won't. So I think it's really like looking for people who want to be brave enough and be trailblazers to do good things.
Yeah, yeah, very good. So I think as we wind this up, I would, like our listeners are, will feel the effects of the crisis, most in your life. And how do you deal with that tension between caring and coping? And how can we, Marlon, uh, be a risk to you in moving through this, have children, how do we support you and your family to be more and more of a conscious where you're not ignoring it, but taking caring and compassionate actions to both local and global. And Marla, as we wind this up.
Yeah, so as usual, we're very happy to get more people coming to talk to us on our show. And thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Very good. Take care, everybody.